Before I could react, my cruel husband attacked me on the head with a stick. I immediately fainted. When I woke up, I realized I was hanging midair, my arms tied with thick ropes to a ceiling fan. I couldn't move because my whole body was wrapped in bandages like a mummy. The room was eerily quiet, but suddenly a loud sound changed everything. My name is Emma Hayes, and I'm 28 years old. 3 years ago, I thought I had everything anyone could want: a loving husband, a beautiful daughter, and a career I was proud of. I lived in Austin, Texas, where my days were filled with planning events and caring for my 2-year-old daughter, Lily. My husband, Brandon, was a software developer, and together we seemed to have built a picture-perfect life. But perfection is often just an illusion. Looking back, I see the signs I missed, the cracks forming beneath the surface of what I thought was a solid foundation. Brandon had always been a quiet, reserved man, qualities I found endearing when we first met in high school. His passion for computers and his calm demeanor had drawn me in, making me believe we could balance each other perfectly. Our wedding day was a simple yet joyous occasion, and when Lily was born, I felt like my world had finally fallen into place. Brandon had looked at her with pride in his eyes, whispering, "We're a family now." For a while, I believed that to be true, but life changed after Lily's birth. Brandon grew distant, often staying late at work or avoiding conversations. When I asked about his long hours or his sudden lack of interest in family life, he would dismiss my concerns with excuses. "Work is crazy right now," he'd say, brushing me off. His warmth had faded, replaced by indifference that I couldn't explain. I tried to hold on to the life we had built, convincing myself that things would improve. I focused on my work as an event planner, organizing weddings and celebrations that brought joy to others. But no matter how much effort I put into creating happiness for my clients, I couldn't ignore the growing emptiness in my own home. The realization that something was deeply wrong was slow and painful. I kept telling myself that Brandon's behavior was temporary, that the man I married was still there, hidden beneath his cold exterior. But deep down, I knew the truth. The life I thought was perfect was falling apart. Brandon and I met during our high school years in Austin, Texas. I was 16, and he was 17. He was the quiet, intelligent type, always buried in his world of computers and coding, while I was more outgoing, drawn to people and creativity. Despite our differences, something about him intrigued me. He seemed mysterious, and I couldn't resist the urge to get to know him. One day after class, I worked up the courage to approach him. "Hey, Brandon," I said nervously, holding my books tightly, "can I ask you something?" He looked up, surprised but polite, and nodded. That moment began a connection that grew stronger with every conversation. Over time, I discovered a side of him that most people didn't see. A kind, thoughtful person who dreamed of creating something meaningful with his work. By the time we graduated, we were inseparable. We spent our evenings talking about our future, imagining a life together. I'll never forget the night of our senior prom. Under the stars, he kissed me for the first time and said, "Emma, I can't imagine my life without you." His words felt like a promise, and I believed them with all my heart. After high school, we stayed together through college. Brandon studied computer science, and I explored my passion for event planning. Though our schedules were demanding, we always made time for each other. He would bring me coffee during late-night study sessions, and I would leave little notes in his textbooks. Our love felt like a partnership, strong and supportive. At 25, we got married in a small ceremony surrounded by close friends and family. I still remember the way Brandon looked at me as I walked down the aisle, his eyes full of emotion. "You're my everything," he whispered as we exchanged vows. The following year, Lily was born. Holding her in my arms for the first time was the happiest moment of my life. Brandon seemed equally overjoyed, calling her our little miracle. For a while, it felt like all our dreams had come true. But as I reflect on those years now, I realize how fleeting that happiness was. The love we shared began to fade, though I couldn't yet see why. After Lily was born, Brandon began to change. At first, it was subtle, longer hours at work, fewer conversations at home. I dismissed it as him adjusting to fatherhood, something I thought would pass with time. But as the months went by, his distance grew more pronounced. He stopped sharing the little moments we used to cherish. Late-night talks about our dreams became rare. When I asked how his day had been, his answers were short and dismissive. "It was fine, Emma," he'd say, barely looking up from his phone. His late nights at work soon became a regular occurrence. "There's a lot going on with this new project," he'd explain when I questioned him. I tried to believe him, convincing myself he was just stressed. But the way he avoided eye contact and brushed off my concerns made my heart ache. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't bring myself to confront the possibility that our relationship was unraveling. One night, as I sat in the living room waiting for him, I stared at the clock. It was past midnight, and he still wasn't home. Lily had been asleep for hours, and I couldn't ignore the loneliness creeping in. When Brandon finally walked through the door, he didn't even apologize. He tossed his bag onto the couch and muttered, "I'm exhausted," before heading straight to bed. The man I had once shared everything with now felt like a stranger. Things only got worse. He became irritable, snapping at me over the smallest things. When I tried to talk to him about our growing distance, he would lash out. "You're always nagging," he'd say, his tone sharp. "Can't you just let me be?" I tried to focus on my work and on Lily, hoping that things would improve. But the warmth and love that once defined our marriage were gone, replaced by a coldness I couldn't understand. The breaking point came one evening when Brandon came home later than usual, his expression cold and detached. "We need to talk," I said, my frustration spilling over. "What now, Emma?" he muttered, clearly annoyed. "You've been distant for months," I said, my voice trembling. "What's going on?" His response was like a slap to the face. "Maybe if you weren't so needy, I wouldn't stay out." Those words shattered me, but nothing could prepare me for what came next. Brandon's words cut deep, but what happened next was far worse. His face twisted in anger as he grabbed a stick from the corner of the room. My heart raced with fear. "Brandon, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking. Without warning, he struck me hard on the head. Pain exploded through my skull, and everything went black. When I woke up, my body throbbed with pain. My vision was blurry, and I struggled to make sense of my surroundings. As the haze lifted, I realized I was hanging midair, my arms tied with thick ropes to a ceiling fan. The coarse fibers burned against my wrists, and my entire body edged from the strain. I was wrapped in bandages, making it difficult to move or breathe. My heart pounded as I fought back panic. The room was eerily silent until I heard Brandon's voice from another room. His tone was cold and calculating. "She's out of the way now. Pack everything, we're leaving tonight," he said. I froze, my mind racing. He wasn't just leaving me. He was taking everything I had worked for and running away with my younger sister, Mia. The betrayal stung more than the physical pain. They had planned this together, turning my life into a nightmare. I knew I couldn't stay like this. I couldn't let them win. With every ounce of strength, I twisted and pulled at the ropes. The coarse fibers tore into my skin, but I ignored the searing pain. Minutes turned into hours as I fought against my bindings. Sweat dripped in my face, and my arms burned with effort. Finally, the knots began to loosen. With one final tug, I freed myself and collapsed onto the cold, hard floor. My body screamed in protest, but I couldn't afford to stop. I forced myself to my feet, my legs trembling beneath me. My only thought was Lily. I stumbled to her nursery and found her sleeping peacefully in her crib. Tears filled my eyes as I scooped her into my arms, holding her close. I grabbed my phone from the counter and fled the house. The cold night air hit my face as I stepped outside. I had no plan, no idea where to go, but one thing was clear. I had survived, and I would do everything to protect Lily and take back my life. I ran through the cold night with Lily cradled in my arms, her small body warm against mine. My thoughts were a whirlwind of fear and determination. I couldn't go back to that house, and I had no idea where to turn. But then I thought of Mr. Hayes, Brandon's father. He had always treated me with kindness, and I prayed he would understand. When I reached his house, my heart pounded. As I knocked on the door, moments later Mr. Hayes opened it, his face edged with concern. "Emma, what's wrong?" he asked, noticing the bruises on my face and the tears streaming down my cheeks. I stepped inside, clutching Lily tightly. "It's Brandon," I said, my voice trembling. "He hit me. He tied me up. He's leaving with Mia." The words felt surreal as I spoke them, but Mr. Hayes listened intently. His face darkened with anger and sorrow as I recounted everything. Brandon's growing coldness, the attack, and his plan to take everything from me. When I finished, Mr. Hayes shook his head, disappointment evident. "I can't believe my son would do this," he said softly. "You didn't deserve any of it." He guided me to the couch and handed me a blanket. "You're safe here," he said, his voice firm but comforting. "We'll figure this out together." Over the next few hours, Mr. Hayes became my lifeline. He called the police to report Brandon's actions and offered me both emotional support and a plan to move forward. "Emma," he said, sitting beside me, "you need to rebuild your life for yourself and for Lily." At first, I hesitated. Accepting help felt like admitting defeat, but I knew he was right. "I don't want to rely on anyone," I said softly, looking at Lily sleeping in my arms. "This isn't about dependence," he replied, handing me a check for $300,000. "This is a fresh start. Use it to rebuild, create something for yourself and your daughter." His words lit a spark in me. I realized that the life I had before was gone, but I had the power to create something new. That night, I made a decision. I would use his support to stand on my own and protect Lily's future. With Mr. Hayes' support, I set out to rebuild my life. The first step was launching my business, Radiant Celebrations, a boutique wedding planning service. I poured every ounce of energy into it, determined to create something meaningful for Lily and me. The work became my refuge, a way to channel my pain into something productive. Each wedding I planned felt like a small victory, a reminder that I was capable of crafting joy despite the darkness I had endured. The early days were challenging. Starting a business from scratch required endless hours of planning and dedication, but I refused to let the obstacles deter me. I worked tirelessly, balancing client meetings, marketing, and late nights designing unique event themes. Slowly but surely word spread about the creativity and care I brought to each celebration. Couples trusted me to make their dreams come true, and Radiant Celebrations began to thrive. But just as I was beginning to find my footing, the past came rushing back. It started with a message from Mia. My stomach churned as I opened it, dreading what I'd see. The photo showed her and Brandon laughing on a beach, holding cocktails with smug expressions. The caption read, "Living our best life." Anger surged through me. Over the following days, more messages arrived. Lavish dinners, luxury trips, and expensive gifts, all flaunted as if to mock me. Maya seemed determined to remind me of the life they had stolen, as though taunting me with their betrayal. At first, I wanted to block her, erase every reminder of what they had done, but I quickly realized that their taunts weren't worth my energy. Instead, I channeled my anger into my work. Every event I planned became an opportunity to prove to myself that I could thrive without them. Radiant celebrations grew even more successful, with glowing reviews and a steady stream of clients. Still, the messages lingered in my mind, a reminder of the betrayal that had nearly destroyed me, but they also fueled my determination. I refused to let Brandon and Maya win. I had escaped their cruelty, and I was building a life they could never take from me. As Radiant celebrations thrived, my focus sharpened on providing Lily with a stable future. But no matter how much success I achieved, the shadow of Brandon and Maya's betrayal lingered. Their taunts, though distant, were a constant reminder of the damage they had caused. I couldn't ignore the injustice of their actions. They had stolen from me, tried to ruin my life, and yet they were living freely. One evening, as I reviewed event proposals in the boutique, Mr. Hayes stopped by. He had become not only a source of support, but also a trusted confidant. As we sipped coffee in the quiet of the office, I finally voiced what had been on my mind. I can't fully move on while they're out there living like they've done nothing wrong. Mr. Hayes sat down, his cup in his hand, his eyes thoughtful but sharp. Then let's make them face the consequences. He said, his words hung in the air, sparking an idea. Over the next few days, we crafted a plan to bring Brandon and Mia to justice. Mr. Hayes, with his deep connections in the community, spread a rumor through mutual acquaintances. He was preparing to distribute a multi-million-dollar inheritance. Knowing Brandon and Maya's greed, we were confident this would lure them back to Austin. At the same time, I began gathering evidence to ensure their crimes couldn't be denied. I compiled bank records that showed the money Brandon had siphoned from my accounts, medical reports documenting the injuries I sustained, and witness statements from people who knew the truth about their betrayal. Each piece of evidence strengthened the case I was building. The waiting was agonizing. I checked my phone constantly, wondering when they would take the bait. Finally, the news came through a mutual contact. Brandon and Maya had returned to Austin. My heart raced at the thought of seeing them again, but I reminded myself that this time I wasn't the vulnerable woman they had betrayed. I was stronger, armed with the truth, and ready to fight for justice. The trap was set, and I was prepared to confront them head-on. This time, they wouldn't escape the consequences of their actions. The bell above the door at Radiant Celebrations chimed, breaking the quiet afternoon. I looked up from my desk and felt my stomach turn. Brandon and Maya stood in the doorway, their expressions smug as they stepped inside. Brandon wore the same false confidence I had seen so many times before, while Maya clung to his arm with a sacking smile. "Emma," Brandon said smoothly, as though the months of silence and betrayal hadn't happened. "It's been too long." I forced a polite smile, masking the anger simmering inside me. "It has. What brings you here?" "We heard about Mr. Hayes's plans," Maya interjected, her eyes darting around the boutique. "A family inheritance, wasn't it? We thought it'd be nice to check in." I gestured toward the seating area near the corner. "Why don't we talk over there?" As they sat, I studied them carefully. They hadn't changed. Brandon's arrogance was as infuriating as ever, and Maya's sweet facade couldn't hide her opportunistic nature. But this time, I had the upper hand. Leaning forward, I asked, "What exactly do you think you're entitled to?" Brandon's smirk faltered, but Maya was quick to recover. "We're family, Emma," she said in a serious tone. "Family looks out for each other." I couldn't hold back anymore. "Family?" I asked sharply. "You mean the kind of family that ties someone up, steals from them, and leaves them for dead?" Their expressions shifted, the cracks in their confidence showing. "You're being dramatic," Brandon said, his tone defensive. "Don't lie to me," I snapped. "I know everything. The stolen money. Your plan to run off with Mia. It's all out in the open now." Before they could respond, the door opened again, and Mr. Hayes stepped inside. His presence was commanding, and his disappointment was palpable. "Emma's right," he said firmly. "You're not getting a dime. Every penny I have is going tow." Mia's face turned pale, and Brandon's smugness evaporated. "You can't do this," Maya shrieked, but Mr. Hayes ignored her. "You've made your choices," he said coldly. "Now you'll face the consequences." As they sat in stunned silence, I felt a surge of satisfaction. The trap had sprung, and justice was within reach. The day after the confrontation, I filed all the evidence with the police. Every detail had been carefully prepared. Bank statements showing the money Brandon had stolen, medical records documenting the injuries he caused, and statements from Mr. Hayes and others who had witnessed their betrayal. The case was airtight, leaving no room for doubt. The police acted quickly, and within days, Brandon and Maya were arrested. The sight of them being led away in handcuffs was both surreal and satisfying. For months, they had lived freely, believing they could escape accountability. Now, they were finally being held responsible for their actions. The courtroom was packed on the day of the trial. I sat beside Mr. Hayes, my hands gripping the edge of the bench as the prosecutor laid out the case. "Your Honor," he began, "the defendants not only embezzled $300,000 from Miss Hayes, but also committed aggravated assault. These were calculated, malicious acts devoid of remorse." Brandon sat with a stoic expression, though his eyes betrayed his unease. Mia, on the other hand, looked pale and shaken, clinging to her attorney as though hoping for an escape. But there was none. When it was my turn to testify, I stood tall, refusing to let them see any trace of fear. "Brandon and Mia didn't just steal money," I said firmly. "They shattered my trust, endangered my life, and left me to defend for myself while they lived comfortably. This isn't just about me. It's about justice for my daughter, Lily, and the life they tried to take from us." Their lawyers tried to soften the blow, painting Brandon as a man under pressure and Mia as someone manipulated by him. But the evidence was overwhelming. The judge listened carefully, his expression hardening as the trial progressed. Finally, the verdict was delivered. Brandon Hayes, the judge declared, for fraud, theft, and aggravated assault, you are sentenced to 12 years in prison and fined $100,000 in restitution. Maya Carter, for fraud and theft, you are sentenced to 8 years and fined $50,000. As they were led away, Brandon glanced back, his arrogance replaced by defeat. Maya's tears flowed freely, but I felt nothing for either of them. Justice had been served. For the first time in months, I could breathe. With Brandon and Mia behind bars, the weight on my shoulders began to lift. For the first time in months, I felt like I could focus on the future without fear or hesitation. My priority was clear, providing Lily with the stability and love she deserved while rebuilding a life that was truly ours. Radiant Celebrations became more than just a business. It became my lifeline. As words spread about the boutique's creativity and dedication, clients began pouring in. Each event I planned felt like a small victory, a reminder that I was capable of crafting joy out of the ashes of my old life. But success wasn't just about financial security. I wanted radiant celebrations to stand for something more. The idea came to me after speaking with a client who had left an abusive relationship. "Your story inspired me," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't think it was possible to start over." Her words stuck with me, sparking an idea. I decided to launch a nonprofit initiative through Radiant Celebrations to support survivors of domestic abuse. The initiative would provide resources, workshops, and connections to shelters and counselors, offering hope to those who felt trapped, like I once had. The first event, a charity auction, was a resounding success. Local artists and businesses donated items, and the proceeds funded programs for women and children in need. The turnout was overwhelming, and seeing the community come together for such an important cause filled me with pride. Meanwhile, I focused on ensuring Lily's future was secure. Part of the restitution money from Brandon's sentence went into a trust fund for her education and long-term needs, knowing she would have the opportunities she deserved. I had worked so hard to create gave me peace. Each day, I found new reasons to be grateful. Whether it was Lily's laughter echoing through our home or a glowing review from a client, these moments reminded me how far I had come. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. The life I was building wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and no one could take it away. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Radiant celebrations flourished beyond anything I could have imagined. What had started as a small boutique became a trusted name in Austin, known for its unique and heartfelt approach to wedding planning. The success was more than financial. It was a symbol of my resilience and a testament to the strength I had found within myself. One evening, after Lily had fallen asleep, I sat by the window of our home, gazing out at the Austin skyline. The city lights shimmered in the distance, a reminder of how far I had come. The memories of Brandon and Maya still lingered, but they no longer held the power to hurt me. They were shadows of a life I had left behind. Lily had become my guiding light, her laughter filling our days with joy. She thrived in the stable, loving environment I had worked so hard to create. One afternoon, she brought me a crayon drawing of our family, just the two of us. "See, Mommy, it's you and me," she said, her face beaming with pride. I hugged her tightly, knowing that I had kept my promise to protect her. Reflecting on my journey, I realized that my happiness didn't come from seeking revenge or dwelling on the pain of the past. It came from reclaiming my power, building a life filled with meaning, and surrounding myself with love and purpose. Each challenge I had faced shaped me, but they didn't define me. Mr. Hayes continued to be a steady presence in our lives, encouraging me to dream bigger. "Emma," he said during one of his visits to the boutique, "have you thought about expanding? Radiant celebrations could reach so many more people." His suggestion sparked something inside me. The idea of taking my business nationwide was daunting, but it was also exciting. With his encouragement, I began laying the groundwork for expansion. I hired a team to scout potential locations and started developing a broader branding strategy. The possibilities felt endless. This was just the beginning. The life I had rebuilt was stronger, brighter, and more fulfilling than I ever thought possible. For Lily and me, the future was ours to create, full of hope, love, and endless opportunities. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please give it a like and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss our next story. See you next time.